They called her a fraud, a stolen valor case who bought her uniform online and memorized Wikipedia articles about military operations. But when the Secretary of Defense collapsed during a terrorist attack at the Pentagon, and a 4-star general dropped to his knees before this fake veteran, the entire room realized they had been catastrophically wrong about Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez. The morning fog hung thick over Arlington National Cemetery as Elena Rodriguez stepped off the metro at Arlington Cemetery Station, her weathered combat boots echoing against the concrete platform. At 31, she moved with the subtle limp that came from an improvised explosive device encounter in Helmand Province, though most observers would mistake it for a simple awkwardness in her gait. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and she wore a simple black dress adorned with a single ribbon rack that most civilians wouldn't recognize, but any military personnel would immediately identify as representing multiple combat. Deployments. Today marked the 5th anniversary of the Battle of Firebase Omega, a classified operation that had never made headlines but had cost the lives of 7 American soldiers and saved hundreds of Afghan civilians from a coordinated Taliban assault. Elena came here every year on this date, not to the main cemetery where tourists and dignitaries gathered, but to Section 60, where the newest generation of American heroes rested beneath identical white headstones. She carried a small bouquet of desert marigolds, flowers that somehow managed to bloom in the harsh Afghan landscape where she had served 3 tours of duty. The cemetery was nearly empty at this early hour, save for a few other veterans making their own private pilgrimages. Elena walked slowly between the rows of headstones, her lips moving silently as she read names she recognized. Johnson Michael A. Thompson, Sarah L. Rodriguez, Carlos no relation, but the shared surname always made her pause. Each stone represented not just a life lost, but families shattered, dreams unfulfilled, and sacrifices that most Americans would never fully comprehend. She stopped at a headstone marked Martinez, David P. Staff Sergeant, United States Army, Afghanistan, Silver Star, Purple Heart. David had been her squad leader during her 2nd deployment, a man who had taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. He had died pulling wounded civilians from a collapsed building during a firefight that lasted 14 hours. Elena knelt beside his grave, her fingers tracing the engraved words as she placed the marigolds at the base of the stone. 5 years, Dave, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the morning breeze. Still fighting the good fight, just different battles now. She remained kneeling for several minutes, her eyes closed, remembering the weight of his body. Armor as she had helped carry him to the medevac helicopter. The way his blood had stained her uniform. The promise she had made to his mother that his sacrifice would not be forgotten. A group of tourists had begun to gather near the main entrance, their voices carrying across the morning air as a guide explained the significance of various monuments. Elena rose slowly, brushing dirt from her knees, and began walking toward the cemetery's administrative building where she worked as a veterans liaison. It was a quiet job that suited her, helping families navigate the complex process of military burials, ensuring that every service member received the honor they deserved, and connecting surviving veterans with the resources they needed to rebuild their lives. The administrative building was a modest structure tucked away from the main ceremonial areas, its offices filled with the quiet efficiency of federal employees, who understood that their work, while invisible to most visitors, was essential to maintaining the dignity of America's most sacred ground. Elena's office was small but organized, its walls decorated with photographs from her deployments, commendation letters from grateful families, and a framed copy of the Military Times article that had featured her unit's humanitarian work in Afghanistan. She had barely settled at her desk when her supervisor, Margaret Chun, appeared in the doorway with an expression that Elena had learned to recognize as harboring either very good news or very bad news. Margaret was a civilian employee who had worked at Arlington for over 20 years, respected by both the military personnel and the groundskeeping staff for her unwavering dedication to honoring the fallen. "Elena, I need to talk to you about something," Margaret said, closing the office door behind her. "There's been a complaint filed about your veteran status." Elena's stomach dropped as Margaret continued. "Someone has alleged that you're committing stolen valor, claiming military service you never performed." The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow. Stolen valor cases were taken seriously by both the military and civilian authorities, involving individuals who falsely claimed military service or combat experience for personal gain. The irony was bitter. She had spent years downplaying her service, never speaking publicly about her deployments, avoiding the attention that came with being a female combat veteran. She had seen too many real heroes never make it home to feel comfortable accepting praise for simply doing her job. "Who filed the complaint?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Margaret consulted her notes, her expression sympathetic. "A retired Army colonel named Harrison Webb. He's been investigating what he calls suspicious veteran claims across the D.C. area. He's built quite a following on social media, exposing people who embellish their service records." Elena knew Webb by reputation. He had served honorably during the Gulf War, but had developed an obsession with hunting down false veterans that had consumed his retirement years. His methods were often more concerned with public humiliation than actual justice, and he had incorrectly accused several legitimate veterans whose service records contained classified information that couldn't be easily verified through public databases. "What specifically is he claiming?" Elena asked, though she was already mentally preparing for the R.E.D. These investigations could drag on for months, affecting her security clearance, her job, and her ability to serve the veteran community. Margaret read from the complaint. "He's questioning your combat service claims, stating that your unit assignments don't match Department of Defense records, and that several of your commendations appear to be fabricated." The problem, Elena realized, was that much of her actual service record remained classified. The Joint Task Force operations she had participated in, the intelligence-gathering missions that had taken her deep into contested territory, and the civilian rescue operations that had earned her commendations were all buried under layers of national security classifications. To most outside observers, her official record would indeed appear suspicious. Too many gaps, too many redacted sections, too many achievements that couldn't be easily explained. "I'll need to see the full complaint," Elena said, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "And I'll need to contact my former commanding officers to see what documentation we can declassify for this investigation." Margaret nodded, handing her a thick folder. "There's something else, Elena. Webb has been posting about this on his social media accounts. He's calling you a diversity hire who stole the identity of a real veteran. The story is starting to get attention." Elena opened the folder and began reading Webb's detailed accusations. He had clearly spent considerable time researching her background, compiling photographs from her social media accounts, questioning inconsistencies in her public statements about her service, and cross-referencing her claimed unit assignments with publicly available deployment records. To someone without access to classified information, his case would appear compelling. The accusations were particularly painful because Elena had always been careful to avoid overstating her service. She had never claimed to be a hero, never sought recognition for her deployments, and had consistently directed attention toward the fallen soldiers she honored rather than her own experiences. She had built her post-military career on quietly serving other veterans, working behind the scenes to ensure they received the benefits and recognition they deserved. As she read through Webb's social media posts, Elena felt the familiar weight of being judged by people who had never walked in her boots. The comments from his followers were vicious, calling her a fake soldier, and demanding her immediate termination. Some had even posted her personal information online, encouraging others to expose her supposed fraud. The hatred was overwhelming. But it was also familiar. She had faced similar skepticism throughout her military career, constantly having to prove that a woman could serve effectively in combat roles. The investigation would be thorough and invasive, requiring her to provide documentation for every aspect of her military service. The problem was that the most significant parts of her service, the operations that had defined her as a soldier and earned her the respect of her peers, were the very parts that couldn't be disclosed without compromising national security. She would have to fight this battle with one hand tied behind her back, unable to present her strongest evidence in her own defense. Alina closed the folder and looked out her office window at the rows of white headstones stretching across the cemetery grounds. Each stone represented a service member who had faced their own battles, their own moments of doubt and fear, their own struggles with being misunderstood by those who had never shared their experiences. She had survived 3 combat deployments, multiple IED attacks, and the challenge of being a female soldier in a male-dominated environment. She would survive this too, no matter how long it took or how much it cost her personally. The phone on her desk rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was the Pentagon's Veterans Affairs Office, requesting her presence at a classified briefing the following week. The timing was coincidental, but Alina couldn't help wondering if the investigation had already reached higher levels of government. She accepted the meeting, knowing that her fight to prove her legitimacy as a veteran was just beginning, unaware that this briefing would soon place her at the center of events that would vindicate her service record in the most dramatic way possible. Colonel Harrison Webb stood in his suburban Virginia home office, surrounded by 3 computer monitors displaying various military databases, social media feeds, and research documents. At 58, he had transformed his spare bedroom into what he called his Truth Command Center, complete with filing cabinets full of suspected stolen valor cases, a wall covered with photographs and timelines, and a professional lighting setup for his weekly YouTube show, Valor Verified. His gray hair was meticulously styled, his polo shirt pressed despite the early morning hour, and his bearing retained the rigid posture that had served him well during his 20-year Army career. Webb had discovered Elena Rodriguez's case 3 months earlier while scrolling through Arlington National Cemetery's employee directory. Something about her profile had triggered his instincts. The combination of her age, her claimed deployments, and the gaps in her publicly available service record had set off alarm bells in his mind. He had spent weeks building his case, cross-referencing deployment schedules, analyzing photographs for inconsistencies, and reaching out to his network of retired military contacts to gather intelligence on her claimed unit assignments. His investigation had revealed what he considered to be a pattern of deception. Elena's official Army records, available through Freedom of Information Act requests, contained numerous redactions and classifications that Webb viewed as suspicious. Her claimed service dates overlapped with periods when her supposed units were deployed to different locations. Her commendations appeared to be issued by commanders whose names didn't appear in standard military databases. Most damning, in Webb's opinion, was her reluctance to discuss her service publicly, a behavior he interpreted as evidence of someone trying to avoid scrutiny. Webb had built his post-military career on exposing what he saw as an epidemic of stolen valor cases across the country. His YouTube channel boasted over 200,000 subscribers who eagerly awaited his weekly exposes of fake veterans. He had successfully exposed dozens of individuals who had falsely claimed military service, from small-town mayors who had never served to motivational speakers who had fabricated entire combat careers. His work had earned him recognition from veteran organizations and law enforcement agencies, though critics argued that his methods were often more focused on public humiliation than actual justice. The Elena Rodriguez case represented something particularly egregious to Webb. Here was a woman working in a position of trust at Arlington National Cemetery, surrounded by the graves of genuine heroes, while allegedly perpetrating a massive fraud. Her employment in veteran services made her deception especially offensive to him. She was not only stealing valor, but potentially denying opportunities to legitimate veterans who deserved those positions. Webb had spent the morning preparing for his scheduled interview with Channel 7 News, a local television station that had begun covering his stolen valor investigations. The producer, Janet Morris, had been particularly interested in the Rodriguez case because of its connection to Arlington National Cemetery and the ongoing national conversation about veteran benefits and employment preferences. Webb had provided her with a comprehensive dossier of evidence, including timeline discrepancies, photograph analysis, and testimony from sources who claimed to have known Elena during her supposed deployment periods. The television crew arrived at Webb's house at precisely 10 a.m., their equipment filling his small office as they prepared for the interview. Janet Morris, a veteran journalist with 15 years of experience covering military affairs, had initially been skeptical of Webb's claims, but had become convinced after reviewing his research. The story had all the elements of compelling television. A trusted government employee living a lie, a dedicated investigator uncovering the truth, and the sacred ground of Arlington National Cemetery being tainted by fraud. "Colonel Webb," Morris began as the cameras rolled, "you've been investigating Elena Rodriguez for several months now. What first made you suspicious of her claims?" Webb leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious and authoritative. "Janet, what we're looking at here is a systematic pattern of deception. Elena Rodriguez has built her entire civilian career on fraudulent military service claims. She's working at Arlington National Cemetery, one of our most sacred institutions, while perpetrating what I believe to be one of the most elaborate stolen valor cases I've ever encountered." Webb proceeded to outline his evidence methodically, using charts and photographs to illustrate his points. He explained how Elena's claimed unit assignments didn't match official deployment records, how her commendations appeared to be fabricated, and how her reluctance to discuss her service publicly was characteristic of someone trying to avoid detection. His presentation was polished and convincing, the result of months of preparation and years of experience in conducting these investigations. "The most disturbing aspect of this case," Webb continued, "is that Elena Rodriguez has been placed in a position of trust at Arlington National Cemetery. She's working with Gold Star families, helping to coordinate military funerals, and representing herself as a combat veteran to people who are grieving the loss of their loved ones. These families deserve to know that the person guiding them through their darkest moments is genuine, not someone who has stolen the identity and experiences of real veterans." The interview continued for over an hour, with Webb providing detailed analysis of every aspect of Elena's claimed service record. He had prepared responses to potential counterarguments, explanations for why classified information wouldn't account for the discrepancies he had identified, and testimony from sources who claimed to have knowledge of Elena's actual activities during her supposed deployment periods. Morris asked about the potential consequences of Webb's investigation. "If your allegations are proven correct, what happens to Elena Rodriguez?" Webb's expression grew stern. "Stolen valor is a federal crime, Janet. Beyond the legal consequences, she would face the loss of her security clearance, her employment, and her veteran benefits. But more importantly, she would face the judgment of the veteran community. We take care of our own, but we also police our own. There's no tolerance for this kind of deception." After the television crew departed, Webb returned to his computer monitors to monitor the social media reaction to his previous posts about Elena. His followers had responded with typical outrage, sharing his content across multiple platforms, and adding their own commentary about the need to expose fake veterans. Several had begun conducting their own investigations, attempting to contact Elena's former colleagues and searching for additional evidence of her alleged deception. Webb had also been contacted by other media outlets interested in covering the Hawaii story. A reporter from the Washington Post had requested an interview, and a producer from a national news magazine show had expressed interest in featuring the case in an upcoming segment about stolen valor. Webb was carefully managing these opportunities, understanding that the more attention the case received, the more pressure would be placed on authorities to take action. The retired colonel had also reached out to his contacts within the military and veteran organizations seeking their support for his investigation. Several prominent veteran advocates had agreed to review his evidence, though some had expressed concern about the potential for false accusations. Webb dismissed these concerns, confident in his research and convinced that the evidence spoke for itself. As the day progressed, Webb received a call from his contact at the Department of Veterans Affairs, informing him that his complaint had been forwarded to the appropriate investigative authorities. The process would likely take months, but Webb was patient. He had learned from previous cases that building a solid foundation of evidence was essential for achieving successful prosecutions. Webb spent the evening updating his case files and preparing for the next phase of his investigation. He had identified several individuals who claimed to have served alongside Elena during her supposed deployments, and he planned to interview them in the coming weeks. He was also working to obtain additional military records through Freedom of Information Act requests, seeking to uncover more evidence of the alleged deception. The Elena Rodriguez case had become Webb's primary focus, consuming his days and occupying his thoughts. He genuinely believed that he was performing a service to the veteran community by exposing fraud and protecting the integrity of military service. In his mind, he was defending the honor of genuine veterans who had earned their recognition through legitimate sacrifice and service. Webb's investigation had gathered significant momentum, attracting media attention and generating public outrage about the alleged fraud. He had succeeded in placing Elena Rodriguez under intense scrutiny, forcing her to defend her service record and potentially jeopardizing her career and reputation. What Webb didn't know was that his investigation had also triggered a series of events within the classified intelligence community, where officials were beginning to realize that exposing Elena's true service record might require revealing information that could compromise national security and endanger lives. The Channel 7 news segment aired at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, reaching nearly 500,000 viewers across the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Within hours, the story had exploded across social media platforms, with hashtags like #FakeVeteran and #ArlingtonScandal trending on Twitter. Elena Rodriguez's photograph, pulled from the cemetery's staff directory, was being shared alongside accusations of fraud, deception, and stolen valor. Her personal information, including her home address and phone number, was circulating in veteran Facebook groups where members expressed outrage at what they perceived as a betrayal of military service. The comment section beneath the news article was a torrent of anger and disgust. "This is exactly what's wrong with our society," wrote one user. "Real heroes are buried at Arlington while this fraud profits from their sacrifice." Another comment read, "I lost 3 buddies in Afghanistan. Seeing this woman profit from stolen valor makes me sick. She should be in prison." The pile-on effect was swift and merciless, with hundreds of users sharing their own experiences of military service while condemning Elena's alleged deception. Elena's phone had been ringing constantly since the story broke, forcing her to turn it off after receiving dozens of hostile calls from strangers who had obtained her number from online postings. Her voicemail was filled with messages ranging from accusations of fraud to outright threats. One caller had left a particularly disturbing message. "We know where you live, fake soldier. Real veterans are coming for you." The harassment extended to her workplace. where the Arlington National Cemetery Administration had received over 200 emails demanding her immediate termination. At the Pentagon, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez was monitoring the situation with growing concern. As the Deputy Director of Military Personnel Records, she had been alerted to the Elena Rodriguez case by multiple sources within the intelligence community. Martinez had spent the morning reviewing Elena's actual service record, the classified portions that revealed a very different story than the one being presented in the media. Her jaw had tightened as she read through the real details of Elena's deployments, her jaw-dropping acts of heroism, and the lives she had saved during operations that would never be acknowledged publicly. Martinez had immediately contacted her supervisor, Colonel James Patterson, who had served as Elena's commanding officer during her second deployment to Afghanistan. Patterson's reaction to the news coverage had been explosive. "This is a goddamn travesty," he had said, his voice shaking with anger. "Elena Rodriguez saved more lives in 6 months than most soldiers do in their entire careers. She's being crucified by people who have no idea what she actually did over there." The problem was that Elena's most significant military achievements were buried under layers of classification that couldn't be easily declassified without compromising ongoing operations and intelligence sources. Her participation in joint task force missions, her work with special operations units, and her role in several high-profile rescue operations were all protected by national security protocols. The Army's official response to media inquiries had been limited to confirming her basic service dates and rank, information that only fueled further speculation about the alleged discrepancies. At the Veterans Affairs Office in downtown D.C., Director Robert Chun was fielding calls from congressional staffers, veteran advocacy groups, and media outlets demanding answers about Elena's employment at Arlington. The political pressure was intense, with several members of Congress calling for immediate investigations into how someone with a potentially fabricated service record had been placed in such a sensitive position. Chun had been forced to place Elena on administrative leave pending the completion of a formal investigation, a move that was leaked to the press within hours and portrayed as evidence of her guilt. The veteran community's reaction was particularly brutal. Elena's photograph was being shared in private Facebook groups with thousands of members, where retired military personnel competed to express the most outrage at her alleged deception. The comments revealed a deep anger about stolen valor cases that went beyond simple fraud. These were men and women who had sacrificed years of their lives, missed birthdays and holidays, and watched friends die in combat, only to see their experiences potentially cheapened by someone who had never served. "I did 4 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan," wrote one group member. "Lost half my hearing to an IED and still have nightmares. This woman is spitting on every real veteran sacrifice." Another comment read, "My son died at age 19 in Kandahar. Seeing this fraud working at Arlington, where my boy is buried, makes me want to drive down there and confront her myself." The emotional investment was palpable, with many veterans feeling personally betrayed by Elena's alleged deception. Colonel Webb was monitoring the social media reaction from his home office, pleased with the attention his investigation was receiving, but also concerned about the increasingly hostile tone of some responses. He had never intended for his work to incite violence or harassment, but he recognized that stolen valor cases often triggered intense emotional reactions from the veteran community. His YouTube subscriber count had increased by 15,000 in just 2 days, and his latest video about Elena had received over 100,000 views. Webb had been contacted by a producer from 60 Minutes who was interested in featuring his investigation in an upcoming segment about stolen valor. The opportunity to reach a national audience was tempting, but Webb was also aware that the increased scrutiny might reveal aspects of his investigation that he preferred to keep private. His research methods, while effective, sometimes skirted the boundaries of legal information gathering. and he had occasionally relied on sources whose motives were questionable. The harassment campaign against Elena had extended beyond social media to real-world consequences. Her neighbors had been contacted by strangers asking questions about her military service, and someone had spray-painted "fake soldier" on her apartment building's wall. The local VFW post where she had occasionally volunteered had asked her to stop coming until the investigation was resolved, and several veteran organizations had publicly distanced themselves from her. Elena's former colleagues at Arlington were divided in their reactions. Some had worked closely with her for years and found the accusations difficult to believe, while others admitted they had always found her reticence about her military service somewhat suspicious. Margaret Chun, her immediate supervisor, was caught in the middle, publicly supporting the investigation while privately struggling with doubts about Elena's guilt. The media coverage had attracted the attention of professional stolen valor investigators beyond Webb's circle. A retired FBI agent named Thomas Bradley, who specialized in military fraud cases, had begun conducting his own investigation into Elena's background. Bradley's approach was more methodical than Webb's, focusing on documentary evidence and official records rather than social media analysis and anonymous sources. Bradley's preliminary findings had raised some questions about Webb's conclusions. Several of the discrepancies that Webb had identified in Elena's service record could be explained by the standard practice of redacting classified information from publicly available documents. The photographs that Webb had analyzed for inconsistencies could have been taken during different time periods or in different locations than he had assumed. Most importantly, Bradley had discovered that Elena's unit assignments, while appearing unusual in public records, were consistent with the deployment patterns of specialized task forces that operated under different reporting structures than conventional military units. However, Bradley's more nuanced analysis was not receiving the same attention as Webb's sensationalized accusations. The story had already developed its own momentum, driven by the powerful emotional reactions of the veteran community and the media's interest in a scandal involving one of the nation's most sacred institutions. Elena had become a symbol of broader concerns about fraud and deception in veteran affairs. Regardless of whether the specific allegations against her were accurate, the pressure was mounting on military and government officials to take decisive action. Several members of Congress had called for hearings on stolen valor cases and veterans' employment screening procedures. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs had been asked to provide a briefing on the Elena Rodriguez case, and the Pentagon had been requested to conduct a comprehensive review of her service record. Elena herself had remained largely silent throughout the ordeal, following the advice of the military attorney who had been assigned to represent her. Her lack of public response was being interpreted by many as an admission of guilt, though those familiar with military legal procedures understood that speaking publicly could jeopardize any future legal proceedings. She had been advised to avoid social media, refrain from contacting journalists, and allow the official investigation to proceed without interference. The story had taken on a life of its own, growing far beyond Webb's original investigation into a national conversation about military service, veteran benefits, and the integrity of America's most sacred institutions. Elena Rodriguez had become the face of stolen valor fraud, her photograph appearing alongside articles about military imposters and benefits fraud. The irony was that the woman being portrayed as a symbol of deception was actually one of the most decorated and heroic veterans of her generation, whose true service record was so extraordinary that it remained locked away in the highest levels of military classification. The first crack in Colonel Webb's seemingly airtight case appeared on a Thursday morning when retired Master Sergeant Kevin O'Brien received a phone call that would change everything. O'Brien, who had been following the Elena Rodriguez story with the same outrage as thousands of other veterans, was drinking his morning coffee when his phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Master Sergeant O'Brien, this is General Patricia Hawkins, United States Army Special Operations Command. I need to speak with you about some social media posts you've made regarding Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez. O'Brien nearly dropped his coffee cup. General Hawkins was a legend in special operations circles, one of the few women to achieve flag rank in the Army's most elite units. Her voice carried the weight of 3 decades of classified operations that had shaped American foreign policy in ways the public would never know. General, Yes, ma'am, I've been following the story about that woman who's been faking her service record, O'Brien stammered, still processing the shock of receiving a personal call from a 2-star general. If you're calling about my posts, I stand by everything I've said. Stolen valor is a disgrace to everyone who actually served. There was a long pause before General Hawkins responded, her voice carrying a tone that O'Brien recognized from his own military service, the sound of someone choosing their words very carefully. Master Sergeant, I'm calling because some of your posts have mentioned specific operations and locations that are still classified. I need you to understand that discussing certain aspects of Elena Rodriguez's service record could compromise national security and endanger lives. O'Brien felt a chill run down his spine. Ma'am, I don't understand. Are you saying that Rodriguez actually served? Because everything I've seen suggests she's a fraud. General Hawkins' response was measured and deliberate. Master Sergeant, I'm saying that there are aspects of this case that are not what they appear to be. I cannot provide you with classified information, but I can tell you that your assumption about Staff Sergeant Rodriguez may be incorrect. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with General Hawkins carefully explaining that certain military operations created service records that appeared suspicious to outside observers. She couldn't reveal specifics, but she made it clear that Elena's case was more complex than the public narrative suggested. O'Brien found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about the situation. After ending the call, O'Brien sat in his kitchen for an hour, staring at his phone and trying to process what had just happened. He had served for 22 years, including multiple deployments with special operations units, and he understood the world of classified operations better than most. If General Hawkins was personally making phone calls about Elena Rodriguez, it meant that there was much more to the story than what Colonel Webb had uncovered. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, a series of urgent meetings were taking place behind closed doors. The Elena Rodriguez case had escalated beyond a simple stolen valor investigation to a potential national security crisis. The media attention had forced military officials to confront the reality that one of their most valuable intelligence assets was being destroyed by an investigation that couldn't access the information needed to vindicate her in a secure conference room on the 3rd floor of the Pentagon. General Marcus Thompson, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, was briefing a small group of senior officials on the Rodriguez situation. The classified PowerPoint presentation he was displaying told a story that was radically different from the one being portrayed in the media. Elena Rodriguez, General Thompson began, is not a fraud. She is, in fact, one of the most decorated soldiers of her generation, with a service record that includes participation in 17 classified operations across 3 theaters of operation. Her official record appears suspicious because the vast majority of her actual service cannot be acknowledged publicly without compromising ongoing intelligence operations. The slide changed to show a photograph of Elena in full combat gear, taken during a nighttime operation in Afghanistan. She was barely recognizable, covered in dust and camouflage paint, carrying advanced equipment that wasn't standard issue for regular Army units. The image had been taken during Operation Silent Guardian, a classified mission that had rescued 43 Afghan civilians from a Taliban stronghold. The problem we face, General Thompson continued, is that Elena's Most significant achievements are buried under layers of classification that were never intended to be lifted. Her participation in Joint Task Force operations, her work with Delta Force units, and her role in several high-profile rescue missions are all protected by national security protocols that supersede any stolen valor investigation. The briefing continued with details that would have shocked the public if they had been available. Elena had been selected for special operations training after demonstrating exceptional marksmanship and language skills during her first deployment. She had completed training programs that existed only in classified budgets, learned techniques that were taught only to the military's most elite operators, and participated in operations that would remain secret for decades. One slide showed Elena's actual commendations, including a classified Silver Star, for actions during a hostage rescue operation that had saved the lives of 3 American contractors. Another showed her Purple Heart citation, earned when she had been wounded by an IED while leading a convoy of Afghan civilians to safety. The courage and skill that had earned her these decorations were precisely the qualities that made her service record appear fabricated to outside observers. General Thompson's presentation revealed that Elena's unit assignments, which had appeared suspicious to Colonel Webb, were actually cover stories designed to protect the identities of special operations personnel. Her deployment dates, which seemed to contradict official records, reflected the reality that classified operations often required personnel to be officially assigned to one unit while actually serving with another. The gaps in her service record weren't evidence of deception, they were evidence of her participation in operations so sensitive that acknowledging them could compromise national security. The meeting concluded with a recognition that the Elena Rodriguez case had created an unprecedented problem for the military. They had a genuine war hero being destroyed by accusations of fraud, but the evidence needed to defend her was locked away in classified files that couldn't be released without endangering lives and compromising ongoing operations. Back in Virginia, Colonel Webb was beginning to encounter resistance to his investigation from unexpected sources. Several of his contacts within the veteran community had stopped returning his calls, and his requests for additional information were being met with evasive responses. Most troubling was a conversation he had with retired Command Sergeant Major Robert Chun, who had initially supported Webb's investigation, but now seemed reluctant to discuss the Rodriguez case. "Harrison, I think you might want to be careful with this one," Chun had said during their phone conversation. "I've been hearing things from people who would know, and they're suggesting that Elena Rodriguez might not be what she appears to be." Webb had pressed for details, but Chun had declined to elaborate, saying only that there were complications with the case that Webb might not be aware of. Webb's confidence was further shaken when he received a call from Janet Morris, the Channel 7 news producer who had featured his investigation. Morris informed him that the station's legal department had raised concerns about the story, particularly regarding the potential for defamation claims if Elena's service record was eventually vindicated. The station was considering issuing a clarification statement, acknowledging that the investigation was ongoing and that Elena had not been formally charged with any wrongdoing. The social media reaction to Elena's case was also beginning to shift, though subtly. Several prominent veteran advocates had posted messages urging caution and reminding their followers that investigations should be allowed to proceed without prejudgment. Master Sergeant O'Brien, who had been one of the most vocal critics of Elena, had quietly deleted several of his posts and declined to comment when contacted by other veterans seeking updates on the case. Elena herself remained on administrative leave, spending her days in her small apartment while the investigation continued. She had been advised by her attorney to avoid any public statements, but the isolation was taking its toll. She had dedicated her post-military life to serving other veterans, and being cut off from that work was almost as painful as the public accusations against her character. The attorney, Major Lisa Patterson from the Army's Trial Defense Service had been reviewing Elena's case with growing frustration. She had access to Elena's classified service record and understood the impossibility of defending her client without revealing information that could compromise national security. "This is a perfect storm," she had explained to Elena during their most recent meeting. "You're being accused of fraud, but the evidence that would exonerate you is locked away in files that can't be opened without endangering people who are still in harm's way." The investigation was reaching a critical point, where military officials would have to choose between protecting national security and defending one of their most heroic veterans. The decision would soon be taken out of their hands by events that would thrust Elena Rodriguez into the center of a crisis that would test every skill she had learned during her years of classified service. The Pentagon briefing room fell silent. As Secretary of Defense Robert Martinez entered, his expression grave as he surveyed the assembled officials. It was 7:30 a.m. on a Friday morning, and the emergency meeting had been called to address what intelligence officials were describing as a credible and imminent terrorist threat against the Pentagon itself. The irony was not lost on anyone present. But Elena Rodriguez, the woman being vilified as a fake veteran, had been specifically requested to attend this classified briefing due to her expertise in counterterrorism operations. Major General Patricia Hawkins stood at the podium. Her presentation: materials classified at the highest levels. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have received credible intelligence indicating that a coordinated terrorist attack is planned against this facility within the next 72 hours. The threat involves multiple individuals with suspected ties to international terrorist organizations, and preliminary intelligence suggests they may have inside knowledge of Pentagon security procedures." Elena sat in the back row of the briefing room, still officially on administrative leave, but summoned due to her specialized knowledge of Middle Eastern terrorist tactics. She had been escorted into the building through a side entrance to avoid media attention. Her security clearance temporarily reactivated for this emergency consultation. The other attendees included the Joint Chiefs of Staff, senior intelligence officials, and select members of Congress who had been briefed on the threat assessment. The intelligence briefing revealed that the terrorist cell had been under surveillance. For months, their communications intercepted by NSM monitoring stations. The group's leader, identified as Ahmad Hassan, had previously been involved in attacks against American installations in Afghanistan and Syria. Most concerning was the discovery that Hassan had somehow obtained detailed layouts of Pentagon security systems, suggesting either a security breach or inside assistance from someone with authorized access. The attack is planned to coincide with the annual Pentagon Memorial Ceremony, General Hawkins continued, when the building will be filled with families of 9/11's victims, senior government officials, and media representatives. The potential casualty count could reach into the hundreds if the attack is successful. The weight of this information settled over the room like a physical presence, each official understanding that they were facing a scenario that could reshape American domestic security policy. Elena listened with the focused intensity that had made her invaluable during her classified operations. Her mind automatically began analyzing the tactical challenges of defending a building as large and complex as the Pentagon, considering entry points, evacuation routes, and the coordination required to neutralize multiple attackers simultaneously. Her expertise in counterterrorism operations had been earned through years of hunting similar cells across Afghanistan and Syria, often working undercover to gather intelligence on planned attacks. The briefing continued with details that highlighted the sophistication of the planned attack. The terrorists had obtained Pentagon employee identification cards, possibly stolen or forged, that would allow them to bypass initial security checkpoints. They had also acquired maintenance uniforms and equipment that would enable them to move through the building's service areas without attracting attention. Most alarming was evidence that they had rehearsed the attack using a detailed scale model of the Pentagon's interior layout, Secretary Martinez interrupted the briefing to ask the question that was weighing on everyone's minds. What are our options for preventing this attack? The response from the intelligence community was sobering. Traditional security measures would be insufficient against attackers who had intimate knowledge of Pentagon procedures and possessed valid identification credentials. The building's size and complexity made it impossible to secure every potential entry point without completely shutting down operations for days. We need someone with experience in counter-terrorism operations, said CIA Director Sarah Chun, someone who understands how these cells operate and can anticipate their tactics. Her gaze moved around the room, settling briefly on Elena before continuing. Unfortunately, most of our best counter-terrorism specialists are currently deployed overseas or assigned to other critical operations. Elena found herself in the surreal position of being asked to help protect the very institution where she worked while simultaneously being investigated for allegedly faking her military service. The officials requesting her expertise were unaware of the stolen valor allegations, but Elena understood that her participation in this operation could either vindicate her service record or destroy her completely if her contributions were questioned. Later, General Hawkins presented the proposed response plan, which involved a coordinated effort between Pentagon security forces, FBI counterterrorism teams, and specialized military units. The plan was comprehensive but relied heavily on conventional security measures that might prove inadequate against attackers with inside knowledge of Pentagon procedures. Elena recognized several potential weaknesses in the proposed approach, tactical gaps that could be exploited by experienced terrorists. During a brief recess, Elena approached General Hawkins privately, her voice low but urgent. "General, I need to point out some concerns with the current security plan. Based on my experience with similar terrorist cells, there are vulnerabilities that haven't been adequately addressed." Hawkins listened intently as Elena outlined potential attack vectors that the security team hadn't considered, drawing on her classified experience with terrorist tactics in Afghanistan. "The attackers will likely have contingency plans for every security measure you've outlined," Elena explained. "They'll expect increased security at obvious entry points, so they'll probably use service tunnels or maintenance areas that most security personnel aren't familiar with. Based on their previous operations, they'll also have planned multiple escape routes and backup targets if their primary objective is compromised." General Hawkins realized that Elena's expertise could be crucial to preventing the attack, but she also understood the complications created by the ongoing stolen valor investigation. "Rodriguez, I need to ask you directly, can you help us stop this attack, and are you prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect the people in this building?" Elena's response was immediate and unwavering. "Yes, ma'am. Whatever it takes." The briefing reconvened with Elena now sitting in the front row, her input officially requested by the Secretary of Defense. She had been asked to provide tactical analysis based on her counterterrorism experience, though the other attendees were still unaware of the allegations against her. Her insights proved invaluable, identifying potential attack scenarios that the security team hadn't considered and suggesting modifications to the defense plan that could significantly improve its effectiveness. Elena's analysis revealed that the terrorists would likely attempt to penetrate the Pentagon security perimeter at multiple points simultaneously, creating confusion and dividing the attention of security forces. She recommended positioning specialized response teams at locations that weren't obvious to outside observers but would be essential for coordinating any complex attack. Her suggestions demonstrated an intimate knowledge of terrorist tactics that could only have been gained through years of actual combat experience. "The key to stopping this attack," Elena explained to the assembled officials, "is understanding that these terrorists have studied our security procedures as intensively as we've studied their attack methods. They'll expect us to follow standard protocols, so we need to implement countermeasures that go beyond conventional security responses. Her recommendations included using military personnel trained in unconventional warfare to supplement regular security forces, creating false security checkpoints to confuse attackers, and establishing communication protocols that couldn't be intercepted by terrorist surveillance. The meeting concluded with Secretary Martinez authorizing the implementation of Elena's tactical recommendations, effectively placing her in an unofficial advisory role for the Pentagon's counterterrorism response. The irony was profound. The woman being investigated for allegedly faking her military service was now being entrusted with helping to defend one of America's most important military installations. As the officials filed out of the briefing room, Elena remained behind to coordinate with the security teams that would be implementing her recommendations. She was acutely aware that her performance over the next 72 hours would either vindicate her service record or provide additional ammunition for those who questioned her credibility. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Hundreds of lives hung in the balance, and her own reputation and career were equally at risk. Colonel Webb, meanwhile, was unaware of these developments as he continued his investigation from his suburban home office. He had spent the morning preparing for another television interview, this time with CNN, where he planned to present additional evidence of Elena's alleged deception. His research had uncovered what he believed to be smoking gun evidence, a photograph that appeared to show Elena in a location where she claimed to have been deployed, but which Webb believed had been digitally manipulated to support her false narrative. The collision course between Webb's investigation and Elena's counterterrorism work was rapidly approaching, though neither party was aware of the other's activities. Elena was preparing to risk her life to defend the Pentagon against a terrorist attack, while Webb was preparing to present evidence that would further damage her reputation and potentially end her career. The resolution would come sooner than either expected, in a way that would shock the entire nation. The Pentagon memorial ceremony was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. on September 11th, marking the 24th anniversary of the terrorist attacks that had claimed 184 lives at the Pentagon. The memorial's 184 benches, each representing a victim, were surrounded by carefully manicured landscaping and bordered by a reflecting pool that caught the morning sunlight. Family members of the victims had begun arriving early, many carrying flowers and photographs of their loved ones, their faces bearing the familiar mixture of grief and determination that characterized those who had lost family members to terrorism. Elena Rodriguez stood in the Pentagon's Secure Operations Center, monitoring multiple screens displaying real-time intelligence feeds from surveillance cameras positioned throughout the building and surrounding grounds. She had been working continuously for the past 48 hours, coordinating with FBI counterterrorism specialists and Pentagon security forces to implement the enhanced security measures she had recommended. Her expertise in terrorist tactics had proven invaluable in identifying potential vulnerabilities and developing countermeasures that went beyond standard security protocols. The intelligence picture had become increasingly alarming as the memorial ceremony approached. NSA intercepts had revealed that the terrorist cell was not only planning to attack during the ceremony, but intended to target the families of 9/11's victims specifically, viewing them as symbols of American resistance to terrorism. The psychological impact of such an attack would be devastating, striking at the heart of American collective memory and potentially triggering a national crisis of confidence in domestic security. Elena had positioned herself at the center of the security operation, her knowledge of terrorist tactics allowing her to anticipate potential attack vectors that conventional security analysis had missed. She had worked closely with Special Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, sharing insights gained from her classified operations in Afghanistan and Syria. Walsh had been initially skeptical of Elena's unconventional recommendations, but had quickly recognized the value of her expertise. The attack will likely begin with a diversionary action, Elena had explained during the final security briefing at 6 a.m. They'll create a distraction at one location to draw security forces away from their primary target. Based on similar operations I've observed, they'll probably use a small explosive device or staged incident to create chaos and confusion. Her analysis had led to the deployment of rapid response teams at strategic locations throughout the Pentagon complex, positioned to respond to multiple threats simultaneously. The morning of the ceremony had begun with an ominous development. Pentagon security had discovered that 4 employee identification badges had been reported stolen from different departments over the past week, though the thefts had initially been attributed to routine administrative errors. Elena's review of the security footage from those incidents had revealed subtle patterns that suggested coordinated action rather than random theft. The terrorists had likely been planning this infiltration for months, carefully studying Pentagon procedures and identifying the most vulnerable points in the security system. At 8:30 a.m., Elena's worst fears were confirmed when NSA monitoring stations intercepted a final communication between the terrorist cell members. The message, transmitted using a sophisticated encryption system that had taken intelligence analysts hours to decode, confirmed that the attack was imminent and would target the memorial ceremony. The terrorists had been divided into 3 teams, each with specific objectives designed to maximize casualties and create maximum psychological impact. Elena immediately contacted the ceremony organizers, recommending that the event be postponed or moved to a more secure location. However, the decision was made by senior officials to proceed with the ceremony while implementing enhanced security measures. The reasoning was that canceling the memorial would represent a victory for terrorism, sending a message that America could be intimidated by threats. Elena understood the political and symbolic importance of this decision, but her tactical experience told her that they were taking an enormous risk. The security operation Elena had designed involved multiple layers of protection, beginning with enhanced screening procedures for all attendees and extending to the deployment of specialized military units in civilian clothing throughout the memorial grounds. She had also arranged for the positioning of sharpshooters on nearby buildings and the installation of advanced surveillance equipment that could detect unusual behavior patterns among the crowd. At 9:15 a.m., Elena's preparations were put to the test when Pentagon security reported suspicious activity near the building's north entrance. A maintenance worker had been observed behaving erratically, taking photographs of security checkpoints and asking detailed questions about evacuation procedures. Elena's analysis of the surveillance footage confirmed her suspicions. The individual was likely conducting final reconnaissance for the planned attack. The security teams moved quickly to apprehend the suspect, but the arrest revealed the sophisticated nature of the terrorist operation. The man was carrying forged Pentagon identification credentials that were nearly indistinguishable from authentic badges, along with detailed floor plans of the building's interior layout. Under interrogation, he revealed that he was part of a larger cell that had been planning the attack for over a year, gathering intelligence on Pentagon security procedures and identifying optimal timing for maximum impact. Elena's expertise in terrorist interrogation techniques, gained during her classified operations in Afghanistan, proved crucial in extracting actionable intelligence from the captured suspect. She had learned to recognize the behavioral patterns that indicated when terrorists were attempting to mislead investigators, and her questioning revealed critical information about the timing and location of the planned attack. The terrorist cell was planning to strike during the memorial ceremony's moment of silence, when the crowd would be most vulnerable and security forces would be focused on protecting the ceremony rather than monitoring for threats. The intelligence breakthrough came at 9:45 a.m., just 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Elena's analysis of the captured terrorists' information revealed that the attack would involve 3 coordinated elements: a diversionary explosion in the Pentagon's parking garage, a direct assault on the memorial ceremony using weapons concealed in maintenance equipment, and a final terrorist action designed to target first responders and emergency personnel. The sophistication of the plan demonstrated the terrorists' intimate knowledge of Pentagon security procedures and their understanding of American emergency response protocols. Elena immediately coordinated with the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force and Pentagon Security to implement countermeasures for each element of the terrorist plan. Her recommendations included repositioning security forces to cover potential escape routes, deploying bomb disposal units to sweep the parking garage, and establishing communication protocols that would allow rapid coordination between different law enforcement agencies. The operation required precise timing and flawless execution. With no margin for error, the memorial ceremony began on schedule, with Secretary of Defense Martinez delivering opening remarks to the assembled crowd of family members, government officials, and media representatives. Elena monitored the security operation from the Pentagon's command center, her attention focused on multiple screens displaying real-time intelligence feeds from throughout the complex. She had positioned herself at the center of the communication network, ready to coordinate the response to any terrorist action. At 10:15 a.m., Elena's worst fears were realized when security cameras detected unusual activity near the Pentagon's service entrances. 3 individuals wearing maintenance uniforms were moving through areas of the building that were restricted to authorized personnel only. Elena's analysis of their movement patterns confirmed that they were following the attack plan described by the captured terrorist, moving toward positions that would allow them to assault the memorial ceremony from multiple directions. The security response Elena had designed was activated immediately, with specialized military units moving to intercept the terrorists before they could reach their targets. The operation required split-second timing and precise coordination with each security team assigned specific responsibilities to prevent the terrorists from achieving their objectives. Elena's knowledge of terrorist tactics allowed her to anticipate their likely responses to the security countermeasures, positioning additional forces to cut off potential escape routes. The confrontation began at 10:22 a.m. when the first terrorist team was intercepted near the building's main electrical system. Elena's analysis had correctly predicted that the terrorists would attempt to disable the Pentagon's power grid to create chaos and confusion during their assault. The security team's intervention prevented the terrorists from accessing the electrical controls, but the confrontation quickly escalated into a firefight that echoed throughout the building's corridors. Elena's coordination of the security response demonstrated the tactical expertise that had made her invaluable during her classified operations. She had anticipated the terrorists' likely reactions to being discovered and had positioned security forces accordingly. Her real-time analysis of the developing situation allowed the security teams to maintain tactical advantage throughout the confrontation, preventing the terrorists from achieving any of their primary objectives. The memorial ceremony continued under heavy security, with most attendees unaware of the life-and-death struggle taking place just hundreds of yards away. Elena's security plan had successfully contained the terrorist threat while protecting the ceremony's symbolic importance. The families of 9/11's victims were able to complete their commemoration without interruption, though they remained under the protection of Elena's comprehensive security operation. The final resolution of the terrorist threat would come in the next few minutes, in a confrontation that would not only save hundreds of lives, but also reveal Elena Rodriguez's true identity to the officials who had been questioning her service record. The woman being investigated for stolen valor was about to demonstrate exactly why her military expertise was so valuable to America's national security. The explosion that rocked the Pentagon's south parking garage at 10:27 a.m. sent shockwaves through the building's reinforced structure, shattering windows and triggering emergency alarms throughout the complex. Elena Rodriguez felt the vibration through the floor of the command center as she watched security camera feeds showing smoke billowing from the garage entrance. The diversionary attack she had predicted was unfolding exactly as her analysis had suggested, designed to draw security forces away from the memorial ceremony where the primary assault would take place. "All units, this is command," Elena spoke into her headset, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting around her. "Diversionary explosion confirmed in Sector 7. Maintain positions around the memorial. Do not respond to the garage incident. Repeat. Maintain a protective perimeter around the ceremony." Her years of experience in combat operations had taught her to recognize the difference between primary threats and diversions, and she knew that the real attack was yet to come. The second terrorist team had used the explosion as cover to advance through the Pentagon's service corridors, moving toward the memorial ceremony with weapons concealed in maintenance equipment. Elena tracked their progress through the building's security camera system, her tactical experience allowing her to predict their route and positioning security forces to intercept them before they could reach their target. The terrorists were highly trained, moving with the precision of military operatives, but Elena had anticipated their approach. Special Agent Walsh coordinated with Pentagon security from her position near the memorial ceremony, her FBI counter-terrorism team ready to respond to Elena's commands. "Rodriguez, we have visual confirmation of suspects approaching from the Northeast Service entrance," Walsh reported through her radio. 3 individuals in maintenance uniforms carrying what appear to be cleaning supplies, but their movement pattern is tactical, not routine maintenance. Elena's response was immediate and decisive. "Copy that, Walsh. Security Team Alpha, move to intercept. Remember, these individuals are likely armed and extremely dangerous. Teams Beta and Charlie, maintain overwatch positions. They may have additional support we haven't identified yet." Her coordination of the security response demonstrated the leadership skills that had made her invaluable during her classified operations in Afghanistan and Syria. The confrontation between the security forces and the second terrorist team erupted in the Pentagon's main corridor, just 200 meters from the memorial ceremony. Elena watched through security cameras as the terrorists abandoned their disguises and opened fire with automatic weapons that had been concealed in their maintenance equipment. The gunfire echoed through the building's corridors, audible even over the memorial ceremony's sound system, though most attendees assumed it was construction noise from nearby renovation projects. Elena's tactical analysis of the firefight allowed her to provide real-time guidance to the security teams. "Team Alpha, they're using the service alcove for cover. Advance from the north stairwell to cut off their escape route. Team Beta, provide suppressing fire from your current position. Watch for grenades their previous operations have involved. Explosive devices." Her knowledge of terrorist tactics, gained through years of hunting similar cells in combat zones, proved crucial in neutralizing the threat. The third terrorist team represented the most dangerous element of the attack plan, as Elena had predicted during her security briefing. This team had infiltrated the Pentagon through a rarely used maintenance tunnel that connected to the building's foundation systems. Their objective was to plant explosive devices near the memorial ceremony's foundation, creating a collapse that would kill hundreds of attendees and first responders. Elena's analysis of the captured terrorists' information had revealed this plan, allowing her to position specialized explosive ordnance disposal teams in the tunnel system. "Command, this is EOD Team Leader," came the voice of Sergeant First Class Michael Torres through Elena's headset. "We've located the device. It's a sophisticated explosive system, much more advanced than typical terrorist weapons. This required significant technical expertise to construct and deploy." Elena's experience with similar devices in Afghanistan told her that this was the work of a cell with access to military-grade explosives and the knowledge to use them effectively. The bomb disposal operation required Elena's direct involvement, her expertise in terrorist explosive devices proving crucial to safely neutralizing the threat. She had encountered similar weapons during her classified operations, including a nearly identical device that had been used in an attack on an Afghan government building. Her knowledge of the specific detonation mechanisms allowed the EOD team to safely disarm the device with only minutes to spare before its programmed detonation time. Meanwhile, the memorial ceremony continued under the protection of Elena's security perimeter, though the sound of gunfire from inside the building was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Secretary of Defense Martinez had been discreetly informed of the situation and had made the decision to continue the ceremony while trusting Elena's security plan to protect the attendees. The symbolic importance of completing the memorial service outweighed the risks, particularly given the comprehensive security measures Elena had implemented. Elena's coordination of the multi-front security operation demonstrated tactical expertise that impressed even the most experienced military and law enforcement officials watching from the command center. She had successfully anticipated every element of the terrorist attack plan, positioned security forces at optimal locations, and provided real-time tactical guidance that prevented the terrorists from achieving any of their objectives. Her performance under extreme pressure revealed skills that could only have been developed through years of actual combat experience. The final confrontation occurred when the first terrorist team, having been driven from the electrical systems, attempted to reach the memorial ceremony through the Pentagon's main entrance. Elena had anticipated this desperation move and had positioned her most experienced security personnel at that location. The terrorists were met by a coordinated response that included military police, FBI agents, and specialized Pentagon security forces, all working under Elena's tactical coordination. All units, suspects are making the final push toward the memorial entrance, Elena announced through the command network. This is their last chance to achieve their objective. Expect them to use any remaining explosive devices or weapons. Priority is protecting the ceremony attendees, but remember that we need at least one suspect alive for interrogation. Her guidance reflected both tactical expertise and intelligence-gathering priorities that would be crucial for preventing future attacks. The terrorist assault was ultimately unsuccessful, with all three teams either killed or captured before they could reach their targets. Elena's security plan had worked flawlessly, protecting hundreds of lives while maintaining the dignity and symbolic importance of the memorial ceremony. The families of 9/11's victims were able to complete their commemoration without interruption, though they remained under the protection of Elena's comprehensive security operation throughout the event. As the immediate crisis subsided, Elena remained in the command center coordinating the investigation of the attack and ensuring that all security protocols were maintained until the threat was completely neutralized. Her performance during the crisis had been observed by senior military and government officials who were beginning to understand that the woman being investigated for stolen valor had just demonstrated exactly why her expertise was so valuable to national security. General Patricia Hawkins entered the command center as Elena was completing her final security briefing, her expression reflecting a mixture of professional respect and personal concern. "Rodriguez, I need to speak with you privately," the general said, her tone indicating that this conversation would address more than just the day's security operation. Elena had proven her capabilities beyond any doubt, but the stolen valor investigation remained a cloud over her future. The success of the counter-terrorism operation had been achieved through Elena's tactical expertise, leadership skills, and intimate knowledge of terrorist operations, all capabilities that could only have been developed through years of actual combat experience. Her performance had been witnessed by officials from throughout the government, including members of Congress who had previously questioned her service record. The woman accused of faking her military service had just saved hundreds of lives through the application of skills that were clearly authentic. However, Elena understood that her vindication would require more than just a successful security operation. The allegations against her had taken on a life of their own, and Colonel Webb's investigation had created a narrative that would be difficult to overcome without official acknowledgement of her classified service record. The confrontation between her demonstrated expertise and the public accusations of fraud was about to reach a dramatic conclusion that would shock everyone who had doubted her authenticity. The stage was set for a revelation that would not only clear Elena's name, but also demonstrate the dangerous consequences of judging military service based on incomplete information. The woman who had been called a fake veteran was about to receive recognition that would silence her critics and vindicate her years of dedicated service to her country. The memorial ceremony was reaching its climax when the third and most dangerous phase of the terrorist attack began to unfold. Elena Rodriguez watched from the command center as her security cameras detected movement in the Pentagon's underground utility tunnels, where the terrorists had positioned their most devastating weapon. The explosive device hidden beneath the memorial grounds was designed to collapse the entire ceremonial area, killing not only the hundreds of attendees, but also the first responders who would rush to help the victims. "Command, this is Tunnel Team Leader," came the urgent voice of Captain James Morrison through Elena's headset. "We've located the primary device, but it's more sophisticated than anything we've seen before. The detonation system appears to be hardened against our standard jamming equipment, and there's a secondary trigger mechanism that we can't identify." Elena's blood ran cold as she realized the terrorists had prepared for the possibility that their device might be discovered. Elena made a decision that would define the rest of her life. "Captain Morrison, I'm coming down to your location. I've encountered similar devices during classified operations. Don't attempt to disarm it until I arrive." She removed her headset and moved toward the command center exit, ignoring the protests of the FBI agents who were coordinating the overall security operation. Her years of experience with terrorist explosive devices had taught her that some threats required personal intervention rather than remote coordination. The underground tunnels beneath the Pentagon were a maze of concrete corridors, electrical conduits, and mechanical systems that few people had ever seen. Elena moved through these passages with the confidence of someone who had navigated similar environments in combat zones, her tactical flashlight cutting through the darkness as she followed the route to where the bomb disposal team was waiting. The weight of hundreds of lives pressed down on her as she realized that her next few minutes might determine whether the memorial ceremony ended in tragedy or triumph. Captain Morrison and his explosive ordnance disposal team had been working for 20 minutes to analyze the device when Elena arrived at their position. The bomb was a masterpiece of terrorist engineering, combining traditional explosive materials with sophisticated electronic components that appeared to be military-grade equipment. Elena's examination of the device revealed construction techniques that she recognized from her classified operations in Afghanistan, where she had encountered similar weapons used by terrorist cells with access to advanced military technology. "This is a hybrid device," Elena explained to the bomb disposal team, her voice steady despite the pressure they were facing. "The primary detonation system is controlled by a timer mechanism, but there's a secondary trigger that's activated by radio frequency. Even if we disable the timer, they can still detonate it remotely from anywhere within a 2-mile radius." Her analysis revealed the true sophistication of the terrorist plot. They had prepared for every contingency, including the possibility that their device might be discovered. Elena's expertise in terrorist explosive devices had been gained through years of classified operations that had never been acknowledged publicly. She had worked alongside the military's most elite bomb disposal specialists, learning techniques that were taught only to personnel with the highest security clearances. Her knowledge of exotic explosive materials and advanced detonation systems had saved countless lives during her deployments, though these achievements remained buried in classified files that couldn't be revealed without compromising national security. The device's construction revealed that the terrorists had access to military-grade explosives that were typically available only to state-sponsored organizations or terrorist groups with significant international support. Elena's analysis of the materials and construction techniques suggested that the cell responsible for this attack had connections to terrorist organizations she had encountered during her classified operations in Syria and Afghanistan. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a domestic terrorist attack, but potentially part of a larger international operation. The key to disarming this device, Elena continued, her hands steady as she examined the complex wiring system, is understanding that the terrorists expected us to find it. They've built in multiple fail-safes and decoy systems designed to trick bomb disposal personnel into making fatal mistakes. The obvious detonation wires are actually connected to a secondary explosive charge that would detonate if we attempted to cut them. Her insights revealed the psychological warfare aspects of terrorist bomb-making, where the devices were designed to kill even the specialists attempting to disarm them. Elena's approach to the device reflected years of experience with similar weapons in combat environments. She had learned to recognize the subtle patterns that distinguished genuine detonation mechanisms from decoy systems, knowledge that had been earned through encounters with some of the world's most sophisticated terrorist bomb makers. Her fingers moved with practiced precision as she traced the device's wiring, identifying the true control systems hidden beneath layers of misdirection and false components. The bomb disposal team watched in amazement as Elena worked, her expertise clearly beyond anything they had encountered in their training. "Rodriguez, where did you learn to work with devices like this?" asked Sergeant Torres, his voice reflecting the awe that military professionals felt when observing true mastery of their craft. Elena's response was measured and professional. "Classified operations, Sergeant. Some knowledge comes with a price that includes never being able to discuss where you learned it." The device's timer showed less than 5 minutes remaining when Elena identified the actual detonation mechanism. The terrorists had hidden the true trigger system inside what appeared to be a standard electrical junction box, camouflaged to look like part of the Pentagon's routine infrastructure. Elena's recognition of this deception technique had come from her experience with a similar device in Afghanistan, where terrorists had used identical camouflage methods to conceal explosive devices in government buildings. "I need wire cutters, a multimeter, and complete silence," Elena announced to the bomb disposal team. "This next part requires absolute precision. If I'm wrong about the detonation sequence, we'll have approximately 3 seconds to evacuate the area before the device explodes." The weight of this responsibility was crushing. Not only were hundreds of lives depending on her expertise, but her failure would also vindicate all of the accusations about her military service being fabricated. Elena's hands moved with surgical precision as she began the complex process of disarming the device. Her years of experience with terrorist explosive systems had taught her to work methodically through the most dangerous procedures, never rushing despite the pressure of ticking clocks and mounting casualties. Each wire she cut, each component she disabled, reflected knowledge that had been gained through encounters with some of the most dangerous terrorists in the world. The device's secondary systems activated as Elena worked, triggering electronic countermeasures designed to prevent tampering. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the underground chamber, and an electronic alarm began sounding, adding to the psychological pressure that the terrorists had built into their weapon. Elena ignored these distractions, her focus entirely on the delicate work of neutralizing a device that had been designed to kill everyone attempting to disarm it. Above ground, the memorial ceremony was reaching its moment of silence when hundreds of attendees would bow their heads in remembrance of the 9/11's victims. Elena was acutely aware that this was the moment the terrorists had chosen for their attack, when the psychological impact would be maximized and the symbolic destruction would be most complete. Her work in the tunnels was a race against time, with the lives of everyone at the ceremony depending on her ability to neutralize the threat before the predetermined detonation time. The final moments of the bomb disposal operation required Elena to make split-second decisions based on knowledge that existed nowhere in military training manuals. She had to rely on instincts developed through years of actual combat experience, making judgments that could only come from someone who had faced similar life-and-death situations repeatedly. Her hands remained steady as she worked, her breathing controlled despite the enormous pressure she was facing. "Device is safe," Elena announced as she completed the final disarming sequence, her voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just prevented a catastrophic loss of life. The bomb disposal team erupted in cheers and applause, their professional admiration for Elena's expertise overwhelming their usual military restraint. She had not only saved hundreds of lives, but had also demonstrated technical skills that few people in the world possessed. The successful neutralization of the explosive device marked the end of the terrorist threat, but Elena's ordeal was far from over. News of the attempted attack was already spreading through government channels, and officials were beginning to ask questions about the woman who had played such a crucial role in preventing the catastrophe. Elena's expertise in counterterrorism operations had been witnessed by senior military and government officials who were now forced to reconcile her demonstrated capabilities with the allegations that she had fabricated her military service. General Patricia Hawkins had been monitoring the bomb disposal operation from the command center, her expression reflecting a mixture of professional respect and personal concern for Elena's situation. The general understood that Elena's performance during the crisis had provided undeniable evidence of her military expertise, but she also knew that the stolen valor investigation would continue to haunt Elena's career unless the classified aspects of her service record could be revealed. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose the truth about Elena Rodriguez's military service, but it would come at a cost that would affect national security policy for years to come. The woman accused of stealing valor was about to receive recognition that would silence her critics forever, but the price of that vindication would be the revelation of military secrets that had been carefully guarded for over a decade. The Pentagon's executive conference room had never hosted a more extraordinary gathering. Secretary of Defense Robert Martinez sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, flanked by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Director of the CIA, and a handful of congressional leaders who had been hastily summoned for an emergency briefing. The room's walls, adorned with portraits of previous defense secretaries and flags representing every branch of the military, seemed to bear witness to a moment that would reshape how the nation viewed military service and the sacrifices made by those who operated in the shadows. Elena Rodriguez entered the room still wearing her tactical gear from the underground operation, her hands bearing the minor cuts and burns that came from working with explosive devices under extreme pressure. She had been given barely enough time to clean the dust and debris from her face before being escorted to what she assumed would be a routine debriefing about the terrorist attack. The assembled officials studied her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amazement, though Elena remained unaware of the full scope of the discussion that had brought them together. General Patricia Hawkins stood at the front of the room, her expression grave as she prepared to deliver information that would fundamentally change how everyone present understood the events of the past few months. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to address a situation that has placed one of our nation's most valuable intelligence assets in jeopardy, while simultaneously threatening to compromise operations that have saved thousands of American lives." The weight of her words settled over the room like a physical presence, each official understanding that they were about to learn information that would never be shared with the public. Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, General Hawkins continued, her voice carrying the formal tone reserved for the most serious military briefings, has been the subject of a stolen valor investigation that has been conducted without access to the classified information that would immediately vindicate her service record. The time has come to reveal the truth about her military service, regardless of the national security implications. Elena felt her stomach drop as she realized that her carefully guarded secrets were about to be exposed to the highest levels of government. The first classified document that appeared on the briefing room screens showed Elena in full combat gear, her face streaked with camouflage paint and dust, standing beside a destroyed Taliban stronghold in Afghanistan's Helmand province. The photograph had been taken during Operation Silent Guardian, a classified mission that had rescued 43 Afghan civilians from a terrorist compound while simultaneously recovering intelligence that prevented 3 additional attacks on American installations. Elena's role in that operation had been crucial, but acknowledging it publicly would compromise ongoing intelligence operations and endanger Afghan sources who had provided critical information. This photograph, General Hawkins explained, was taken during Elena's participation in a joint task force operation that resulted in the neutralization of a terrorist cell responsible for killing over 200 Afghan civilians. Elena's expertise in infiltration and reconnaissance allowed our forces to approach the compound undetected, while her knowledge of local languages enabled her to communicate with the hostages and coordinate their rescue. The details of the operation filled the room with a sense of awe as officials began to understand the true scope of Elena's military service. The second document revealed Elena's participation in Operation Desert Falcon, a classified mission in Syria that had prevented a chemical weapons attack on a refugee camp housing over 10,000 civilians. Elena had operated undercover for 3 months, gathering intelligence on terrorist chemical weapons capabilities, while maintaining a cover identity that placed her in constant danger of discovery and execution. Her work had provided the intelligence necessary for precision airstrikes that destroyed the chemical weapons facility while minimizing civilian casualties. Elena's work in Syria, General Hawkins continued, required her to operate without backup or support, relying entirely on her training and instincts to survive in one of the world's most dangerous environments. Her intelligence gathering prevented what could have been one of the largest terrorist attacks in modern history, saving thousands of lives while maintaining the plausible deniability that American foreign policy required. The magnitude of Elena's contributions to national security was becoming clear to everyone present, along with the reasons why her service record had been classified at the highest levels. The third classified operation revealed Elena's role in the rescue of 3 American contractors who had been kidnapped by terrorists in Afghanistan. Elena had led a team of special operations personnel through enemy territory, using her knowledge of local customs and languages to navigate safely through areas controlled by hostile forces. The rescue operation had been successful, but it had also resulted in Elena being wounded by an improvised explosive device that had left her with the scars and injuries that still affected her daily life. The Purple Heart that Elena received for her wounds in this operation, General Hawkins explained, was awarded for injuries sustained while leading a rescue mission that saved 3 American lives. Her leadership during the operation, despite being wounded, enabled the successful extraction of the hostages and prevented their execution by terrorist forces. The citation for Elena's Purple Heart revealed a level of heroism that few people would ever demonstrate, yet it had remained classified to protect the identities of the rescued contractors and the intelligence methods used to locate them. Secretary Martinez interrupted the briefing to address Elena directly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who fully understood the sacrifices she had made. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the classified nature of your service record has placed you in an impossible position. You have been accused of fabricating military service that is actually more distinguished than most people could imagine, but the evidence of your heroism has been locked away in files that couldn't be opened without compromising national security." Elena nodded silently, finally understanding why her attempts to defend herself had been so futile. The briefing continued with details of Elena's post-military work, revealing that her position at Arlington National Cemetery had been more than just a civilian job. She had been maintaining unofficial contact with intelligence agencies, providing expertise on terrorist tactics, and helping to identify potential security threats against military installations. Her work had been conducted quietly and without recognition, but it had contributed to preventing several potential attacks on American soil. "The irony of Elena's situation," General Hawkins observed, "is that she has been accused of stealing valor while simultaneously being prevented from revealing the true extent of her valor. The classification of her service record has made it impossible for her to defend herself against accusations that are not only false but deeply offensive to someone who has sacrificed so much for her country." The assembled officials began to understand the cruel paradox that Elena had been facing. Trapped between false accusations and national security requirements, Congressional Representative Sarah Chen, who had been following the stolen valor investigation with interest, spoke up with a question that reflected the thoughts of many present. "General Hawkins, if Elena's service record is so distinguished, why haven't we been able to find some way to vindicate her without revealing classified information?" The answer revealed the complexity of modern military operations and the challenges faced by personnel who operated in the shadows. "Representative Chun," General Hawkins replied, "Elena's most significant achievements occurred during operations that remain active in terms of intelligence gathering and source protection. Revealing her role in these operations would not only compromise ongoing missions, but could also endanger the lives of foreign nationals who provided crucial assistance to American forces. The decision to classify her service record was made to protect people who are still at risk, but it has had the unintended consequence of making her appear to be a fraud." The briefing room fell silent as officials contemplated the implications of what they had learned. Elena Rodriguez, the woman who had been vilified as a fake veteran, was actually one of the most decorated soldiers of her generation, whose true service record was so extraordinary that it had been classified at the highest levels of government. The accusations against her were not only false, but represented a profound injustice against someone who had risked everything for her country. Sia. Director Thompson added his perspective to discussion, his words carrying the authority of someone who had overseen Elena's classified operations. Elena's work during her military service provided intelligence that prevented dozens of terrorist attacks and saved thousands of American lives. Her expertise in counterterrorism operations has been crucial to our understanding of how terrorist cells operate and how to defeat them. The stolen valor investigation has not only been an injustice to Elena personally, but has also threatened to compromise one of our most valuable intelligence assets. The weight of Elena's true service record was overwhelming to everyone present. She had not only served with distinction, but had done so in ways that required extraordinary courage and sacrifice. Her work had been conducted in the shadows, without recognition or acknowledgement, because the nature of her missions required absolute secrecy. The classification of her achievements had been necessary to protect ongoing operations and foreign sources, but it had also left her vulnerable to false accusations that she couldn't defend against. As the briefing concluded, Elena sat in stunned silence, finally understanding why her attempts to clear her name had been so unsuccessful. The evidence of her military service existed, but it was locked away in classified files that couldn't be opened without endangering lives and compromising national security. The accusations against her had been made by people who had access to only a fraction of the information needed to understand her true contributions to American security. The stage was set for a dramatic vindication that would not only clear Elena's name but would also demonstrate the profound injustice that had been done to her. The woman accused of stealing valor was about to receive recognition that would silence her critics forever. But the manner of that recognition would shock everyone who had doubted her authenticity. The Pentagon's main auditorium had been hastily converted into a ceremony that would be remembered for generations. Word had spread through military channels that something extraordinary was about to take place, though the specific details remained classified until the moment Secretary of Defense Martinez took the podium. The assembled crowd included senior military officials, congressional representatives, veteran advocates, and members of the media who had been covering the stolen valor investigation. Colonel Harrison Webb sat in the front row, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing apprehension as he began to understand that his investigation had taken an unexpected turn. Elena Rodriguez entered the auditorium through a side door, escorted by General Patricia Hawkins and flanked by members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She was wearing her dress blue uniform for the first time in years, the ribbons on her chest representing only the publicly acknowledged portions of her military service. The classified commendations that told the true story of her heroism remained locked away in secure files, though their existence would soon be revealed to the assembled audience in a way that would shock everyone present. Secretary Martinez approached the podium with the bearing of someone about to deliver one of the most important speeches of his career. The auditorium fell silent as he began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of authority and the gravity of the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to address a grave injustice that has been perpetrated against one of our nation's most distinguished veterans. Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez has been the subject of accusations that are not only false but represent a profound misunderstanding of the sacrifices made by those who serve our country in classified operations. The Secretary's words hit Colonel Webb like a physical blow, his face draining of color as he began to realize the magnitude of his error. Webb had built his reputation on exposing fraudulent veterans, but the growing evidence suggested that he had targeted someone whose service record was actually more distinguished than he could have imagined. The other attendees in the auditorium began to murmur among themselves, sensing that they were about to witness something unprecedented. Elena Rodriguez, Secretary Martinez continued, has been accused of fabricating a military service record that includes multiple combat deployments, numerous commendations, and participation in classified operations. These accusations have been made by individuals who had access to only a fraction of the information needed to understand her true contributions to American national security. The Secretary's words were measured and deliberate, each sentence designed to prepare the audience for revelations that would fundamentally change their understanding of military service. General Hawkins stepped forward to address the crowd, her expression reflecting the seriousness of the information she was about to reveal. Today, the Department of Defense has made the unprecedented decision to declassify portions of Elena Rodriguez's service record in order to vindicate her against false accusations of stolen valor. This decision comes at significant cost to ongoing operations and intelligence gathering efforts, but the injustice being perpetrated against Elena requires extraordinary measures. The first declassified document appeared on the large screens positioned throughout the auditorium, showing Elena's actual military service record with previously redacted information now visible. The document revealed a service history that was extraordinary by any measure, including participation in 17 classified operations across 3 theaters of combat. Elena's deployments had extended far beyond the conventional military assignments that appeared in public records, encompassing some of the most dangerous and sensitive missions conducted by American forces. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, General Hawkins announced, participated in Operation Silent Guardian, a classified mission that rescued 43 Afghan civilians from a Taliban stronghold. while simultaneously recovering intelligence that prevented 3 additional terrorist attacks on American installations. Her role in this operation earned her the Silver Star, a commendation that has remained classified until today due to the sensitive nature of the intelligence operations involved. The revelation of Elena's Silver Star sent shockwaves through the auditorium, particularly among the veteran advocates who had been following the Stolen Valor investigation. The Silver Star was one of the military's highest decorations for valor, awarded only to personnel who had demonstrated exceptional heroism in combat situations. Elena's receipt of this award, previously unknown to the public, provided undeniable evidence of her distinguished military service. Colonel Webb sat in stunned silence as the evidence mounted against his investigation. Each new revelation about Elena's service record made his accusations appear more baseless and his research methods more fundamentally flawed. The man who had built his post-military career on exposing fraudulent veterans was facing the reality that he had targeted someone whose service record was actually more distinguished than his own. The second declassified document revealed Elena's participation in Operation Desert Falcon, the classified mission in Syria that had prevented a chemical weapons attack on a refugee camp. The document showed photographs of Elena in deep cover, operating under an assumed identity while gathering intelligence on terrorist chemical weapons capabilities. Her work had provided the information necessary for precision airstrikes that destroyed the chemical weapons facility while saving thousands of civilian lives. Elena's work in Syria, General Hawkins continued, required her to operate without backup or support for 3 months, maintaining a cover identity that placed her in constant danger of discovery and execution. Her intelligence gathering prevented what could have been one of the largest terrorist attacks in modern history, earning her a classified commendation that has never been publicly acknowledged until today. The magnitude of Elena's contributions to national security was becoming clear to everyone present, along with the reasons why her service record had been classified at the highest levels. The woman who had been accused of fabricating military service had actually participated in operations that were so sensitive they couldn't be acknowledged without compromising ongoing intelligence efforts and endangering foreign sources who had provided crucial assistance. At this moment, General Marcus Thompson, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, entered the auditorium accompanied by a figure that caused a collective intake of breath from the assembled crowd. General David Patterson, a 4-star general and former commander of Special Operations Command, walked slowly down the center aisle toward the podium. General Patterson was a legend in military circles, having commanded some of the most successful counterterrorism operations in American history, and his presence at the ceremony indicated the extraordinary nature of what was about to take place. General Patterson approached the podium with the bearing of someone who had spent decades making decisions that affected the lives of thousands of people. His uniform displayed ribbons representing nearly every major military operation of the past 30 years, and his reputation for integrity and tactical brilliance had made him one of the most respected officers in the American military. When he began to speak, his voice carried the authority of someone who had personally witnessed Elena's heroism. I had the privilege of serving as Elena Rodriguez's commanding officer during her most significant classified operations, General Patterson announced, his words carrying the weight of absolute authority. I can state without reservation that Elena is one of the most courageous and skilled soldiers I have ever had the honor to command. Her service record represents the very best of American military tradition, and the accusations against her are not only false but represent a profound disservice to her extraordinary sacrifices. The general's endorsement of Elena's service record was overwhelming in its implications. General Patterson's reputation was unassailable, and his personal testimony about Elena's military service provided evidence that no reasonable person could dispute. The Stolen Valor investigation had been based on incomplete information and flawed analysis, while Elena's actual service record revealed a level of heroism that few people would ever demonstrate. Elena Rodriguez, General Patterson continued, saved my life. During a classified operation in Afghanistan when our convoy was ambushed by terrorist forces, she single-handedly held off the attackers while coordinating the evacuation of wounded personnel, demonstrating courage and tactical skill that enabled our entire team to survive the engagement. Her actions that day epitomized the finest traditions of military service, and she has continued to serve her country with distinction in every assignment since. The personal testimony from General Patterson had a profound impact on everyone present, particularly Colonel Webb, who was beginning to understand the full scope of his error. Webb had accused Elena of fabricating military service when she had actually served with such distinction that a four-star general considered her one of the most courageous soldiers he had ever commanded. The investigation that Webb had initiated with such confidence was collapsing under the weight of evidence that revealed Elena's true achievements. As General Patterson concluded his remarks, he did something that no one in the auditorium expected. The four-star general, one of the most senior officers in the American military, slowly lowered himself to one knee before Elena Rodriguez, his head bowed in a gesture of respect and recognition that transcended military protocol. The symbolism was unmistakable. The highest levels of American military leadership were acknowledging Elena's service with the ultimate gesture of respect. The auditorium fell completely silent as General Patterson knelt before Elena, his action representing not just personal recognition but the military's collective acknowledgement of her extraordinary service. Elena stood perfectly still, tears streaming down her face as she realized that her years of classified service were finally being recognized by the institution she had served with such dedication. The woman who had been accused of stealing valor was receiving the highest possible recognition from the American military. General Patterson remained kneeling for a full minute, his gesture witnessed by hundreds of military and civilian officials who understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented. When he finally stood, his voice carried the emotion of someone who had personally witnessed Elena's heroism and understood the injustice that had been done to her. Elena Rodriguez is a true American hero, he said simply, and anyone who questions her service record is questioning the integrity of the American military itself. The ceremony concluded with Elena being presented with the declassified versions of her classified commendations, including the Silver Star that had remained secret for over a decade. The presentation was made by Secretary Martinez, who spoke about the extraordinary sacrifices made by personnel who served in classified operations, often without recognition or acknowledgement. Elena's service record would now be partially public, though many details would remain classified to protect ongoing operations and foreign sources. Colonel Webb left the auditorium in complete silence, his investigation thoroughly discredited, and his reputation as a stolen valor investigator destroyed. The man who had built his post-military career on exposing fraudulent veterans had been exposed as someone who had targeted one of the most distinguished soldiers of her generation. His accusations had been based on incomplete information and flawed analysis, while Elena's actual service record revealed achievements that exceeded anything Webb had accomplished during his own military career. The Elena Rodriguez case became a turning point in how the military handled classified service records and stolen valor investigations. New procedures were established to ensure that personnel with classified achievements could be protected from false accusations, while maintaining the security requirements that protected ongoing operations. Elena's vindication came at a cost, but it also established precedents that would protect other veterans who had served their country in the shadows. 6 months after the Pentagon ceremony, Elena Rodriguez returned to Arlington National Cemetery, but this time as the newly appointed Director of Veterans Affairs, a position created specifically to honor her service and expertise. The Stolen Valor investigation had been completely discredited, and Colonel Webb quietly retired from public life, his reputation as an investigator permanently damaged by his failure to recognize a genuine American hero. Elena's story became a powerful reminder that true heroism often operates in the shadows, unrecognized and unacknowledged. Her decorated service record, partially declassified for the first time in military history, inspired a new generation of veterans to understand that their sacrifices mattered, even when they couldn't be publicly recognized. The woman who had been mocked as a fake veteran had become a symbol of authentic courage and dedication. Today, Elena continues her work supporting veterans who have served in classified operations, ensuring that their contributions to national security are acknowledged and their sacrifice is honored. Her foundation, established with donations from across the country, provides specialized support for veterans whose service records remain classified, protecting them from the kind of false accusations that nearly destroyed her own reputation. Lesson of Elena Rodriguez's story resonates far beyond military circles. It reminds us that we should never judge someone's worth based on incomplete information, and that true heroism often requires the courage to remain silent about our greatest achievements. If this incredible story of hidden valor and ultimate vindication inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of ordinary people who accomplished extraordinary things. Have you ever encountered someone whose true story was hidden beneath the surface? Share your experiences in the comments below. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful stories that remind us that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized until the moment when their true character is revealed. Remember, the most profound courage is often the kind that nobody sees.